Dee, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. A big welcome from the AGEC team to our session, The Power of Technology in Advancing Gender Equality. We are going to be led in conversation by the following panelists: Dumi Kaliati, Rachel Sibande, Jensina Larson, and Binga Sesan. My name is Dee Penungwe. I work as a consultant in the areas of social impact, design, and analysis. So I'm very excited to be here with you all. What a fantastic learning opportunity. So needless to say, we are in the company of such an accomplished panel today. Their combined work experience is over 50 years in the tech space alone. Their expertise ranges from digital financial service development and implementation, meeting the challenges of public health, agriculture, disaster management, all through technology, and all the way to creating solutions even for elections. They have all walked the halls of some really impressive institutions. And I would like to start off by thanking them all for taking the time to share their views on how we can more intentionally advance gender equality through technology. So unfortunately, I can't possibly do each panelist justice in terms of a grand enough introduction. So I'm going to kick off our session by asking each panelist to introduce themselves and also answer the question, what has inspired you through your journey? So if that's okay with you, I'm going to invite Rachel to get us started. Good morning, Rachel.
Morning, Dee. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. I'm really excited about our conversation here.
Sure. I'm happy to be here this morning. So like Dee said, first things first, my name is Rachel Sabande. I'm originally from Malawi, but a Pan-African digital development specialist. I trained to be an ethical hacker. And what has driven me into that space really is curiosity. Understanding that science, tech, engineering, and mathematics fields offer a lot of opportunity and potential for us to innovate, to create new solutions to problems that the world faces is what has really been driving me. In terms of what I do, I wear two hats. My first hat is with MHub. MHub is a social enterprise that I established about 6 to 7 years ago. We focus on training, coaching, mentoring, and providing investment readiness support to young innovative entrepreneurs. We provide digital skills training to youth, and in particular also girls, training them from the very basics of technology, for example, skills to get onto the internet, how to use a computer, all the way through to advanced skills such as building mobile applications, websites, robotics, and suffices to say that one of our success stories is 2 young girls that we trained how to build robots, that were able to build a robot that enhances access to safe and clean water. So with that robot, they were able to compete at the inaugural Global Robotics Competition. These are the stories that warm my heart in my work when we are able to leverage the power of technology to solve social problems. In my other role, I wear my hat as Senior Director at the United Nations Foundation within a unit called the Digital Impact Alliance. There, I lead our big data work on the African continent, championing the utilization of traditional and non-traditional data, in particular data from mobile network operators in its billions, to answer key questions on population movement, migration patterns, and how those relate to several facets of the development spectrum, such as access to safe and clean water, enhancing immunization outcomes, but also looking into aspects of food security monitoring. That is what I do as an ethical hacker, as a big data scientist, and as a social entrepreneur in the technology space. Last of all, we've realized that we need to enhance access to financing for emerging and innovative entrepreneurs. And so as MHub, we've also leveraged up to $1.2 million in financing for emerging, innovative, entrepreneurs, to provide them with financing to scale their products and services that solve social problems to scale. So this is what I do, and driven by curiosity. Thank you, Dee.
Oh, wow, Rachel. That's just so much fantastic work. I'm just very excited to be in the company of all you guys. And I think let's move right into Dumisani, if you could introduce yourself before we get even more excited about all this work that you guys are up to. Over to you, Dumisani.
Thank you, Dee. So I'm Dumisani Kariati, and I'm the founder and CEO of Micromake, which is a Malawian-based hardware startup that is locally developing low-cost drones for the delivery of medicine for young children and pregnant women in the hard-to-reach areas of Malawi. So we are targeting those areas that are hard to reach. I'm also the co-founder of the Makerspace, which is an innovation space that provides tools, workspace, and also skills in entrepreneurship to young women and men to innovate in hardware. So we're looking at IoT and robotics. Through my startups, we have reached out to 65 women. So this is through Micromake. We have reached out to 65 women who are our early users of the drone delivery system. These women are from 5 communities in Yasenya, that's in Kasungu, and they have tested delivery of pregnancy test kits, HIV self-test kits, and cough syrup for children. These women have also contributed to data. The data has been on the challenges that they face to access healthcare. So from the 2 surveys that we have conducted, one in 2019 and one in 2020 with these women, it has been found that over 90% of them face challenges to access healthcare, whereby over 90% say they do not have a health center in their community, and they have to walk over 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours to access the nearest health center. And their means of transportation is walking. This data, we have shared it with our supporting partners, such as the UNICEF Drones Corridor Lead. We have shared with USADF, as well as the Goalkeepers Youth Action Accelerator under the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this data is important for such global health organizations to make decisions that can help such communities. And through my startup also, we have another sector, which is knowledge sharing. And through that, we have trained 63 local youths on how to develop our drone technology, whereby 60% of those youths are women, young women. And through the Makerspace, recently we've just graduated 20 local youths as well in digital fabrication of COVID-19 PPE. So that is using 3D printers to develop COVID-19 PPE, as well as using computer-aided design softwares. And again, 60% of these are women. Well, so myself, I hold a bachelor's degree in information technology from the University of Malawi, and an executive education in business and entrepreneurship from Northwestern University, that's in Illinois, USA. I'm a Yale Mandela Washington Fellow and a Goalkeepers Youth Action Accelerator advocate, which saw me visit high-level meetings such as the United Nations Gathering General Assembly in 2019. Well, what inspires me to join into tech, I think it's from my early age, where I was always fascinated with science, as well as being raised by my mother mostly. It taught me hard work. And when I was in Form 3 of my secondary school, she got me a laptop, and that increased my passion in technology. And when I got into, when I got selected to do IT at the University of Malawi, that just increased my skills. I got introduced to microcontrollers, started innovating, and I could meet women near Queen's Hospital, where my college is, that would travel long distances just to access healthcare. And each time I could pass through that hospital, they could ask for money. And I got interested to know, why do they ask for money? And most of them told me that they were coming from outside Blantyre, and they didn't have money to cater for food and others. That got me thinking to say, how can I help such? And it got me to come up with my innovation, Cotidos, and later the drones to help such women.
Thank you so much, Dumi, for sharing your story. If we can move on to Jensina. Good morning, Jensina.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jensina. I am the founder of World Pulse, and my life's work over the past decade has been learning how to use technology to build online community that supports the flourishing of women's voices and leadership. And I'm the founder of World Pulse, which today is the leading social network and online community connecting women change makers across 190 countries. Our membership is over 75,000, and women and girls are logging on, they're exchanging stories, they're exchanging resources and building movements and impacting millions of lives today. And I really want to give a shout out to World Pulse members from Africa who may be watching or listening in or in the audience today, and my remarks will hope to do justice to the wisdom and the work and the leadership of the community of World Pulse based in Africa, which is actually the majority of our most active users are based in Africa. And so I want to share a few of what I've learned and what inspires me from our global network, but it really started for me with a vision. Way before Facebook or WhatsApp existed, I grew up as a young girl, very shy in the rural United States on a farm. And I would go hide behind the barn with the goats and the chickens and bring my books. And I would just read about the world and dream of traveling the world, but my voice felt very trapped inside. And it wasn't until 19 I became a journalist, and I traveled to the Amazon and then ultimately to the Burma-Thai border, Myanmar, as it's called today, where there's right now a brutal military coup underway. And I was working with the stories of the women leaders there, and it was very heavy to stories of the ethnic cleansing, the mass rape, and I just remember feeling hopeless and trying to fall asleep one night on a bamboo mat. It was hot, it was sticky, and I was wondering who would care about these voices. And suddenly, you know how sometimes lightning strikes you? Well, I saw the stars pulse, and I saw this vision, and I had the vision that what the world really needed was a communication source where these incredible leaders could speak for themselves in their own words and connect to each other, to not feel so alone. And from that moment on, I realized that it was important. I needed to step back, but that what I could help do is create an architecture and help design the technology that could activate these voices. So, you know, I think the theme of what I've learned that's so powerful, something I call connected voice. And what I've learned from our community is that connecting online can be a major pathway to power for women and girls, and especially if she's logging on when she is in a place where her voice feels like in a cage or maybe even dead inside. And if she comes into an online place where she feels safe, where she's being connected to people that believe in her, it's like logging on to a warm blanket. And it can be transformational. It can accelerate her leadership. We see, you know, every day community members catapulting to win awards, author books, get scholarships, fellowships, build movements, and have learned that you can build a digital leadership pathway, bringing on trainings in digital change making and digital storytelling. And today, our community has been activated to impact 17.6 million lives with new expanded businesses, standing up for land rights, running for office, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the three things that I'll just leave with, that what we've seen from our community has said very much, you know, our fingers may be on the keyboard, but our feet are on the ground. We don't want to access technology just to, you know, just as certainly economic advancement is important, but we don't just want to be a cog in the engine of economic growth for its own sake. We want to use tech as a tool of transformation to one, power movements, two, learn about and secure our rights, and three, advocate for other marginalized groups around us, whether that be adolescent girls, whether that be those with disabilities. So as we move on today, I can tell some of those stories of the movements that we've seen rise across Africa with the tools that women and girls are building with tech. But I think most importantly, the power of collective voice and collective movement building that can be facilitated through online platforms.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Binga, if you would introduce yourself. Morning, Binga.
Good morning, Dee, and good morning, everyone. If it's another time zone, good day to you. My name is Benga Sheson. I'm in Lagos, Nigeria today, working from home, I guess like many other people, you know, around this time. And one of the major lessons from last year for me, and as it continues, of course, as people continue to use tech to work remotely, is that many of the things that we called impossible many years ago, you know, giving people the chance to work remotely, especially women who, for many reasons, would prefer to work remotely. We tag those things impossible, but now they're life-saving, you know, possibilities. And for me, you know, how all of this started can be traced back, you know, Dumisani talked about when he was in his third year, he got a laptop from his mom. And that just reminded me of my own story in the third year in secondary school where, well, I mean, there were no laptops. This was in 1991. This was about 30 years ago. And unfortunately, even though our school had these two computers that were presented to the school, I mean, everyone knew the school had two new computers because it was a big deal. This was, don't forget, this was 1991, not so many schools. In fact, I think very, very, very few schools in Nigeria or anywhere else on the continent had, you know, computers for themselves. And so because I kept seeing my friend, you know, Wale would go to the computer room and come back and talk about him playing games. I was like, well, if Wale can go there, I can go there too. So I decided to go to the computer room. But when I got to the first half of the computer room, which was the principal's office, it wasn't a problem. But as soon as I got to the entrance, the teacher who was in charge literally looked down at me and said, oh, computers are not for people like you. You can't understand how to use them. You know, in his own way, he was protecting the computers from being damaged so that the students could use them, but by preventing the students from using them. And that, you know, for me was the trigger that, you know, set me up to decide I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn, you know, to use whatever this is, and not only to learn it, I'm going to make sure that no boy, no girl, no one my age, no young person goes through the kind of embarrassment that I went through on that day. And I did. Thankfully, 10 years later, I became Nigeria's IT Youth Ambassador. At the time, I was working for a nonprofit called Junior Achievement. I was then invited back to my secondary school because, I mean, I'd become Nigeria's IT Youth Ambassador. I was in the news and all that. And so when I finished my presentation talking to the students, to the boys and girls about how to move from a student trying to learn how to use a computer to one that was using it and, you know, traveling the world talking about it and earning, you know, money for it, the teacher, who of course was still a major player in the computer space in the school, was the one who was invited to give the vote of thanks. And then he said, you know, when Benga was here, we always knew that he would eventually succeed and make the school proud. And I think that, you know, struck a major chord in me that, you know, the person who was responsible for placing the barrier in my way wasn't even conscious of it. You know, and this is him many years later claiming that, you know, he knew that I was eventually going to become a successful story. And that got me very interested. You know, I was just interning at Junior Achievement, but that got me interested in working more with Junior Achievement. And in working with them, I will go to secondary schools, I will meet boys and girls. And I noticed, you know, at the time that there were more boys in the room than girls. And so when I resigned in 2007 to set up Paradigm Initiative, the first thing I did was to go to one of the communities in, you know, one of the urban slums in Lagos. I mean, the largest of them all, Adegunle. And I asked to meet with boys and girls because I wanted to be sure that, you know, they were equally represented in the room. And I still noticed, you know, when we started the training, because that led to a training program, I noticed that when we started the training, there were cases where we would select a girl and then the parents would say, by the way, this girl was selected, but she has to stay at home to work and do something so that her brother can have something to eat. So let her brother come to the program. And then we knew we had a problem. You know, we were doing about 20% girls and 80% boys eventually. And even when we spread the program to other regions of Nigeria, to the north and to the southeast, we had the same challenges. But of course, as we continue to train, as the Esthers of this world, the Ogochukwus of this world began to become better stories, as they became the trainers themselves. Now today, as I speak to you, we have 52% girls in the classrooms and 48% boys. And of course, that tells you a lot about what has changed since then. I trained as an engineer originally, and so my interest was more in building things. But you know, as I continue to work with Junior Achievement and as I continue to do what I do at Paradigm Initiative, I realized that, you know, building things is great, but building the people that build things was the call for my life, and that's what I do right now. That's half my work at Paradigm Initiative, is to make sure that young men and especially young women, because they are the ones who face the most barriers, you know, like Ogochukwu in our program in Aba, in Abia State in Nigeria, whose father literally kicked her and her mom and her sister out of the home because you know, he said he preferred to have a male child, and because his wife couldn't give him a male child, she wasn't qualified to be in the home. So he kicked them out of the home. But you know, after a while, she came to our program. She went through the program. It's a 10-week immersive training program. She got an internship. She got a job. She graduated. And then the father wanted to come back into her life and said, well, because she had become the breadwinner. And so for me, that opportunity to build the people that can build things that can change their stories and that can also help us toward, you know, the opportunity of achieving equality through what they demonstrate in their lives is, you know, half of what I do. The other half of what I do is making sure that the policy environment is right. So my other work is in digital rights to make sure that, yes, while the people learn, they also have the right atmosphere to be able to practice what they've learned without being scared of somebody shutting down the internet or, you know, being accused of the wrong things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benga. It's just been so wonderful to get insight into your Genesis stories and to hear how far so many of you have come in such a short time. This is such an exciting panel to be a part of. I was taking note of all the new things I was learning as you were speaking. So with us today, we have an ethical hacker. We've got someone sparing on knowledge sharing and, you know, building drones in country. We have someone who's built an incredible platform for everyday women to build their own movements. And we have Binga, who's been fighting for inclusion and access since he was a child himself. So, you know, this is a really exciting panel, and I would really urge all of you who are listening in to take advantage of the time and pop some questions into our chat, and we can ask our lovely panel to address your questions. So I urge you to get started with that. In the meanwhile, while we're waiting, we have a few questions that are ready for our panel. And this first one is for Rachel. Question being, Rachel, why is it more vital for Africa to think technology now more than ever?
Thanks, Dee. Such a profound question. I'll start off by, you know, giving some historical perspective from where we've come from. There have been 3 revolutions before the current industrial revolution. The other 3 revolutions were mostly based on enhancing mass production, electricity, steam, gas. And in the third revolution, we did see the advent of automated systems and technology. Today, we are in the fourth industrial revolution, where the main trends are digitization, artificial intelligence, blockchain, big data, you name it, cloud computing, Internet of Things, drones is what Dumisani is doing, robotics, 3D printing. Those are the emerging trends of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, Africa has not done very well in the previous industrial revolutions. And that is evident, for example, by the lack of infrastructure. If you think about energy, if you look into the transport infrastructure, it's not fully formed, it's not fully developed, it's not good enough. We haven't done well. But there's an opportunity in this fourth industrial revolution because it is mostly automated, mostly remote, and we're going to see jobs transitioning. Now, that is an opportunity that Africa needs to leverage. It's interesting to note that by 2030, Africa is going to have a workforce of about 1.3 billion people. Now, imagine if Africa does not leverage this demographic dividend, then it's going to be a crisis because there are going to be high unemployment rates, and that spirals to create other problems such as poverty, inequalities, and so on. And so it's very important for Africa to leverage digital technologies now as we're in the fourth industrial revolution so that we can catch up for not doing well in the past revolution. We need to reskill, upskill our demographic dividend, and it's part of the work that inspires me in training young people, in particular women, which make up 50% of the continent's population. And like Barack Obama said previously, we cannot talk about development without half of the world's population, which are women and girls. And so it's important for Africa to start to leverage this demographic dividend to ensure that our labor force becomes relevant with the right skills in the fourth industrial revolution. Now, there are a number of things that I think we should do as a continent. Number one, from my perspective, is to make investments into digital and physical infrastructure. Now, this includes investments into energy, because we cannot talk about enhancing digital access to digital platforms and technology without access to energy. We know that almost, more than 500 million of Africa's population still do not have access to electricity. From where I come from in Malawi, only about 11 to 12% of the population has access to electricity. Now, that's important to make investments. Number two is to make investments in the terrestrial infrastructure for delivery of connectivity. Doing that is going to ensure that we can reduce the costs of accessing data. For your information, the continent is rampant with very high prohibitive data costs. For example, Eswatini as a country ranks very high in terms of exorbitant data costs, which is a deterrent for people to access digital platforms, for people to leverage jobs in the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, imagine 1 gigabyte of data in Eswatini alone costs about $21 US. Now that's quite exorbitant. And those prices are only going to go down and become more affordable if governments and the private sector can collaborate to make investments into terrestrial infrastructure to reduce the costs for access to digital platforms. The second thing among the many things that we could think of that Africa should do is to enhance access to digital skills through formal and informal skill platforms. And that's also a space that I have taken charge of by establishing the Technology Hub, which is among over 600 tech hubs on the African continent. We are championing the development of digital skills, from the most basic skills to advanced skills, training young people, training women, to leverage the power of tech to access basic information for health or basic information for agriculture, or indeed to build solutions, because we've seen solutions that have been built by Africans for Africans. M-Pesa is one of them. It has enhanced digital financial inclusion, which is absolutely key in enhancing the digital economy. Previously, we know that over 15 million Kenyans in 6 years have accessed digital financial services through M-Pesa. And I want to intimate that if we want to reach majority of the African population with financial inclusion, it's going only to be done through the mobile phone because majority are not banked. It's the unbanked population. And yet over 50% of the African population have access to mobile phones. And so we need to innovate around the mobile phone to reach people with financial inclusion. Now, all this is only going to happen if we can drive digital skills for the African population, women inclusive. And there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from countries like Rwanda, for example, where partnerships between the government and mobile network operators have leveraged the large distribution network of telcos to train women, to train the communities how to leverage the power of digital technology. Last of all is a personal insight or motivation in that in my time studying computer science, studying information security, even when I studied for my PhD, I almost found it a lonely journey. I was the only woman in my PhD class. I was one of only 2 women in my master's class. I was one of 5 women in my bachelor's class. It's a very lonely space for women, and we need to create more spaces to enhance digital skills, but also provide incentives for women to thrive within the 4th industrial revolution as a continent. Thank you, Dee.
Thank you, Rachel. What a fantastic answer. I have way too many notes, but I have been keeping an eye on the questions that are coming in. We have a great question here from Kudakwashe, and it is for Binga. And Kudakwashe would like to know, what have been the negative societal perceptions of young women's civic participation and leadership in Africa? Shall I repeat that for you?
It's fine. I got it, and I'm reading it here. When I read it, I smiled because, you know, coincidentally, some people say, but not coincidentally, actually, in what is a manifestation of a series of activities, some of the most popular uses of technology on the African continent have been for civic education and political participation. And what you will see is women leadership in those roles, including not just you know, the example of organizations like Enough is Enough in Nigeria, which is led by a woman, which is basically helping people know more about how to participate in elections, even before that, to even protests in Sudan, in Nigeria, in other countries that are led by women. And I'll tell you this for a fact, that what that has led to is that because you're hearing the maturity of the feminist principles and feminist ideology, and then you're seeing the strong women take leadership, what has happened is the coward in us as men and some others who may be women has then seen them as threats. So here you are, you're used to seeing your women, you know, bowing to you and not getting opportunities, but here they are getting the opportunities and using them. And what has happened is that we've seen this negative societal, you know, perception where we're beginning to say, oh, you know, the feminists, they're angry people, these women are abusing power and things like that. But guess what? I think this is when we need to step on the gas a lot more. This is when we need, because we need a root shock. As far as the patriarchy and some of the things that I was trained a traditional young African man, and, you know, the expectation was that I would grow up, get married, have children, the woman in the kitchen, the man in the living room watching TV and reading newspapers and things like that. But thankfully, I learned to unlearn many things and to begin to understand the power of both men and women holding their halves of the sky. It doesn't make any sense when one person holds out the sky and the other person is not even empowered to hold up the sky. So I think, yes, there is unfortunately a pushback. There is a narrative to say that, oh, my president in Nigeria, for example, said something which is most embarrassing, but it's not very popular. It was asked by the German chancellor, nonetheless, a woman leader herself, that it was asked for his opinion of women and leadership, and the president, my president, shamefully said the place of women is in the other bedroom. Now, obviously, that exposes one of the reasons why he is considered incompetent and why he hasn't delivered on some things. But the reality is that this pushback should be fuel for us to understand that people react when there are things that, that happen that they're not used to, but it doesn't mean that something is going wrong. So I would say that yes, there have been, negative societal perceptions saying that, misunderstanding strong women as, people who are trying to be out of their roles, of, their place and things like that. But I think that what we now need to do is to continuously educate a new generation of men to understand that when you see a woman fully in leadership and playing a role, what you need to feel is not to be threatened. What you need to feel is appreciation of the fact that this is my colleague standing up and doing what is right and doing the correct thing. And I think, this is extremely important. So I don't know, Dee, if I can go ahead to just, in the same breath, address the other question that I see my name on here, because it's quite related. I don't know if I can.
Please go ahead.
Good. So it's, asking how, we've catered for those girls and young women who have been denied access by their parents for cultural reasons or because they live in geographically remote areas. And I think these two are connected. So what you will see is that many of the women who are now coming into their own, literally, but are seen by society, because they've always been in their own, to be honest, but society is now seeing them as coming into their own. The reason why that is happening is because for many of them, they've had the advantage of exposure, education, and an enabling environment. But this other question speaks to those who, for cultural reasons or for geography, are not able to do that. And I shared earlier the story of Ogochukwu. Ogochukwu, unfortunately, had to be kicked out of her house because culturally, where she comes from in Nigeria, it is the woman who gives the man a child. And if the woman gives the man a female child, is given, she's given him she's given him less than a child. If she gives him, in quotes, a male child, then she has given him someone who can inherit his name, because every child takes the name of their father. And then she's given him a child that can continue the legacy of the family. And that, unfortunately, is the reason why she found herself in the place where she got to. But guess what? The reason why she was able to come out of that was because she got exposed to training, an opportunity that allowed her to create our own economic power. And I think the two things that we've learned, number one, is when we lay a foundation for women to create their own socioeconomic power, we give them a chance to play their role much better in society, and they don't get looked down. And secondly, is that we've unfortunately signaled the wrong way. We used to have men trainers in class, and we complained, oh, why are there no women? But guess what? All we needed to do was to replace the man in front of the class with a woman, and the story changed, because they could see someone they could identify with. Now we have women in our classrooms who bring their babies. We have a space where they can go breastfeed the child, come back to class, and and that changes everything. As simple as writing she or he in a sentence, as simple as putting a picture of a woman in announcing a new job, which typically would be the picture of a man standing, maybe teaching a woman who is sitting down. But swapping that role in a simple picture has been able to help us in a way to achieve this, to break down some of these cultural barriers. And I think what happens is the more of these success stories you have, the less of an argument you have to make with the custodians of this archaic cultural practices.
Wow, thank you so much, Binga. And I think we are a little time conscious at this point, but the next question I have here is, I think, a great question for you, Dumisani, in terms of the work you're doing in the knowledge sharing space. So we have a question here that questions whether Africa is ready to reskill, upskill, and adapt to this new normal. What do you think, Dumisani, judging from the work that you're doing?
I think Africa is ready, and I think it's one necessary thing that organizations have to put so much focus on, the technology, because one, the COVID-19 itself has shown us the weaknesses in our system, whereby we need local production. When the COVID pandemic hit, there was a closure on and restriction on movement. How do we get goods in if we are used to importing? So we need to do local production, and that's one thing. Also, the second thing, I'm looking at it as a power tool for gender equality, because when we talk about technology, all of a sudden we are bringing it to the level of it's a mental battle. While maybe a male like myself can outrun a female my size, maybe in carrying a bigger weight, let's say 80 kg. But when it comes to technology, we're talking about brain power, and that's a big power tool for achieving gender equality. So I'll say that Africa is ready for upscaling, and we need to focus more on investing on spaces that are sharing knowledge in terms of technology.
Fantastic. I'm very glad to hear of that, and very excited about this next question too. And keep them coming. We don't have much time left, but if you do have a few more questions, keep them coming. I have this question, which I am going to hand over to you, Jensina. I think you're perfectly placed to address this, judging from the work you've been championing. When you look at technology, most women are cyberbullied, especially when they aspire to be leaders. How does one deal with that and continue working towards their goal? This is a question from Cindy, so I hope you're still with us. Over to you, Jensina.
Thank you, Sandisa, for that question. And I just want to cheer all the other panelists from everything that you've said prior. In terms of the cyber violence, it is real and it is tragic. It's a war zone for women and girls online. Recent studies, Path International just came out with a study. They surveyed 15,000 girls globally and found that 58% had been cyber bullied or experienced cyber violence. And of course, that's extremely silencing and prevents women and girls from even wanting to put their opinion out there, much less run for office. World Pulse did a big tech, She Transforms Tech survey as well, and got stories from women and girls all over the world about a new tech agenda. And we found 75% of respondents had experienced cyber violence. And I think there's a couple of things that need to happen. One, I think there needs to be a standard and a seal of gender safety for platforms. And feminist movements are organizing around this so that users can know that this place adheres to a certain standard of protection to members. Also, there's new technology being invented, like bots that can help, zone in if bullying is happening on Twitter, for example, and provide supportive comments to women and girls. And then lastly, it's the training. I heard the skilling, the education, everybody spoke to that, but we see that there's we have women digital voice ambassadors and trainers on the ground in over 30 countries. They're local community-based trainers. And they're not just doing digital skilling, but they're also doing empowering curriculum around safety and security and helping create collective support if anything happens, that there's community behind those women and girls so they can have collective voice. Like the Me Too movement got stronger when there was more collectivity around it. So those are three areas. And then of course the advocacy to the tech industry in general, that we have to stop making tech from the minds of men, and we need women designers, and we need technology that's secure for all people.
Thank you so much, Jensina. And we have a couple of calls to action rather than questions in the chat at the moment. I'm just going to read them all out for everyone to share. And even though they're quite directed, I feel like this is a challenge all our panelists can continue to work towards meeting. So the first one we have here is, we also need resources on your platform to help girls and young women with low self-worth to find their voice and find hope by gaining skills and advocacy for developing nations. So while that's directed at Jensina, I feel like everyone here is well placed and diligently already working towards that. So great, shout out to the work they're already doing and the work that evidently people would like to see more of. We had another call to action here, which was for Dumisani. again, but I see all of you being able to tackle this. So please create drones for creating more gender safe spaces, to see the nearest location for boreholes and water wells in rural areas, and also for schools where girls are frequently abducted so that they can be protected from danger. This sounds like a great way to sort of upskill and diversify the use of technology in our communities and communities where you're already working. And for as many suggestions as they are like this, I hope that those of us who are listening and interested in this space of work, that you figure out how you plug in and find ways to use your skills and your time to move these sorts of things forward. So, I mean, thank you so much for these comments and for your questions. We're at the point, I'm afraid, where we have to start wrapping up a little bit more, but I think we do have time for perhaps one more question. And I am going to call on you, Binga, again, if you don't mind. If you could tell us what your advice is for gender equality champions. How do actors move from digital inclusion, from that being an ideal that we talk about, to a basic that's accessible in all communities? So if you could just give us a quick couple of points of how you've done it, and some general advice on how people listening here today could take that forward too.
Okay, so I think the way to move from telling to showing is to show. Show, don't tell. As a friend of mine would say, show them, don't tell them. I'll give you a very perfect example. I mentioned earlier how we replaced the men in front of the classroom with women, and that changed everything. When we talk about moving towards gender equality, we have to practice what we preach. We can't, for example, if you're an event organizer, I'm an event organizer, right? We host the Digital Rights and Inclusion Forum every year. And just a few days ago, to give you a practical example, one of our regional officers planned an event, and it was 5 men, no woman in that entire region supposed to speak on the panel. And I sent an email. We don't do manuals at PIN. So we canceled that forum because it is impossible for you to say that as an organization you're fighting. Eventually, we also the event because the person who was planning our team then corrected our error, reached out to other people, and then we had a good panel of men and women, brilliant all through. So I think the first point is to embody inclusion and equality so that others can see it and see that you mean what you say and you say what you mean. Because you can't have success stories of women and girls if there is no opportunity the same way that men have the opportunity. And one of the reasons why tech is so full of men is because there's a camaraderie that comes with bringing my guy, in quotes, like my guy on to the program, just the same way we have the opportunity where you can then, as a woman, the next person who needs the opportunity is a woman, so you introduce her to the opportunity. And it worries me, by the way, because the entire foundation of computer science, of computing, is traceable to what women did when women were actually called computers, when they were the ones punching the machines and things like that. So I think we need to, number one, practice what we preach and change the stereotypes. Replace those men in front of the classrooms with women. There are qualified women who can stand there to train them so that they don't see what is impossible. You can't tell a child that, oh, you can become anything you want when they can't see themselves in that position. I'm sure we all heard the story of the small boy who met Barack Obama. His parents had told him all his life, oh, you can become president of the United States, you can become anything. And when he met Barack Obama, he told him to please, bring his head lower, and he touched his hair because he wanted to feel that this hair is as kinky as my own black hair, to be sure that you're real, right? Because that way, from that day, you didn't have to tell that child you can become it. You can already see it. So that's number one. And I think number two is to identify and clear the
Oh, I think we've lost Binga, which is such a shame. Yeah, he's definitely frozen there. although he has perfect timing, because unfortunately we have to wrap up at this point. Thank you so much for sharing your stories here today. I wish we had more time. I feel like there's a lot more we could have discussed and explored. Technology has already played such a vital part in advancing women's rights globally, creating pathways for peace, health access, dialogue, education. The list is endless. And I sincerely hope that these conversations will be advanced further with your own conversations and hopefully linkages through this platform and through this conference that will allow you all to stay in conversation. Thank you again to our wonderful, incredibly qualified and experienced and just fantastic panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your time. Big shout out from us, the girls, the people of Africa, the women out there waiting for solutions. Thank you so much for being a part of our success stories. Have a lovely day, everybody. Take care, be safe, and please stay connected. Continue to talk during this conference, and let's find solutions and move them forward. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Dumisani. Thank you, Jensina. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
See you online.